In our discussion of contemporary issues facing Asian Americans in U.S. society, we're going to explore this issue of Asian Americans and social class, education, work, and the model minority image. Now, first, we're going to focus mostly on education, and then we'll move over to the world of work and the professional lives of Asian Americans. But in both domains, we're going to see how this notion of the model minority image is connected to both. Okay. Now, right off the bat, let me tell you that, there's this widespread conception of Asian Americans, as you may know, as this particular ethnic group that especially emphasizes education as a means towards upward mobility in U.S. society. Hence, this notion of Asian Americans in their emphasis of that as being these exceptional students compared to other ethnic groups, that they're these whiz kids, these math geniuses, very technical. And indeed, this notion that they're just naturally smarter than other groups. Now, this is a glaring misstep in this characterization, right? That's being made here. The misstep in the stereotype is the belief in something we've discussed earlier. That is to say, this notion that Asian Americans are essentially more studious, more brainy, right? More math oriented than other groups, right? The key word I just said is essentially, right? And this goes back to essentialism, something we've discussed. Essentialism, again, is that belief that persons that fall within a particular social category, whether it's gender, race, or what have you, all possess a common characteristic, which is really an essence, right? Think of it as an essence supposedly shared by all members of that group. And therefore, it leads to notions of them being superior or inferior, depending on that trait, whether it's positive or negative. Now, as we discussed, essentialism is wrong-headed, of course. So, and that's true even when you ascribe positive traits, like Asian Americans being naturally intelligent, right? More so than other groups. Now, statistics show that Asian Americans indeed are, relatively speaking, high achievers in the domain of education and work, right? And in education, both in secondary and college education. Yet, what we will explore in this topic is how complicated and even problematic this stereotype of Asian American whiz kids, so to say, how problematic that is, and how it's strongly correlated to social class. Okay, as indicated here in the title of this topic, Asian Americans and social class. And we'll also explore other things like how it affects the mental health of Asian American students, and even how this image of the model minority has been weaponized, employed as a weapon in the ideological discussion of race relations in contemporary society. So more on that later. Now, I just mentioned social class there, right? Let's think about the different categories used to distinguish social groups from each other in general, right? You think of gender, you think of race or ethnicity, and you think of social class. In fact, a lot of academics like to make use of what I just mentioned, race, gender, and social class, as a prism or a lens to examine society or history, right? Okay, so social class, to be specific about that, compared to, say, gender or race, that in general terms refers to an individual's place in the socioeconomic hierarchy or ladder, right? Whether you're the top 1% or you're a member of the extensive middle class in American society, or perhaps the lower class, the underclass. You also think about things like wage or your salary. The nature of your job. Are you a doctor or are you a custodian? Right? You even think about wealth and assets and property ownership, and even things like status and prestige that's connected to salary or wealth or your job type, right? Okay, so hopefully you can see how the topic, however, of education is connected to social class. And it's for the simple reason that in the US, as with many other societies in the world, the pursuit and achievement of higher education is seen as a crucial means towards achieving this, climbing up the ladder, so to say, upward socioeconomic mobility. In fact, many of you are in college precisely because of this fact, right? So, academics and researchers doing work in social research of education, whether they're focusing on high level engineering, like high tech, domains, or perhaps even in the inner city public school, where you see the woeful lack of student resources and funds, and then you see higher dropout rates there. Whenever you do that, these researchers, you are emphasizing the category of social class here. Yet, as we'll discuss in more detail later, scholars argue that you can't really disaggregate or disconnect social class from other categories like race and gender. Okay, they're so interwoven that if you isolate one, you're going to be misguided in your research. Okay, so indeed, race and social class, in fact, that's the title of this, right? Asian Americans and social class. One is ethnicity, one is class. Here, they strongly interweave. They interpenetrate each other. And here, we're just going to focus on one particular group, right? Asian Americans, to see how this happens. So again, the stereotype we are questioning and interrogating is, quote, Asian Americans as exceptional in the domain of education, unquote. Again, the notion of brainiacs and math nerds as focused solely on academics rather than, extracurricular activities, sports, and all that stuff that many other American students focus on, right? And even again, the essentialized stereotype as naturally or inherently more intelligent. In fact, a common joke Asian Americans receive when they're not doing so great in a particular test or a course, you'll hear this joke: "What kind of Asian are you?" Right? As if Asians are not supposed to fail, right, in the world of academics. Now, again, stereotypes. This is something that's different, and hopefully it's clear to you by now in this course how this is a departure from the outright racist depictions applied to Asians in the past. Probably foremost among those depictions has been this notion of perpetual foreigner, right? That's a big stereotype. The notion again that they're incapable of assimilation. We talked about, for instance, the Asiatic Exclusion League that wanted to prevent Japanese from coming over, or we talked about Gerald DeWitt and how his justification for relocation was entangled with ideas that involved Orientalism, right? That they're perpetually foreigner. Even this notion of sexual threats to white women. Remember the Filipino Manongs in the West. And then we look at other caricatures of Asians based on Orientalism, like Asian women being submissive, exoticized, right? Subservient, and men lacking in masculinity. Therefore, they can't build the railroad, right? Which was proven false by what the Chinese did. Now, here's the deal, though. Those were past stereotypes that didn't really correspond to actual reality. What happens, however, when you do have a stereotype that's based on some definite correspondence to empirical reality.